Good morning, everyone over in Europe, and good early morning in the United States. This is Lori Spencer. It's like the middle of the night here in North America, but I wanted to bring you an update because this is such a busy and eventful and, in fact, tragic news event that we felt that it was important to bring you the latest as soon as we possibly could. So, as soon as my colleague and correspondent over there in Crimea was awake, where it's early morning, I want to welcome my friend and colleague Kevin Michelizzi. Good morning, Kevin. Glad you're okay. I was worried about you yesterday when I heard about the attack on Crimea. How are you, my friend?
Hey, Lori, doing okay. We actually, my wife was over in that area when all this went on. So,
Ooh. Well, you don't live too far from the beach, right? We were just talking about that yesterday. And when I heard about this, I was hoping it wasn't that beach.
yeah, no, it wasn't that beach. The beach in Sevastopol is about 60 kilometers or, 30 miles from us. But they have a bunch of peach groves and flower, I don't know, what do you call flower things? Flower groves and things. And my wife and her mother had gone over to pick peaches. So they were in the midst of all the goings ons at the time.
Oh, no. So they could hear the missiles incoming?
Oh, yeah. And the air defense.
I bet. I bet that was really loud. I mean, I would think that she would be terrified, but then again, this is kind of normal, I guess, in Crimea. I should probably tell our audience if you're not familiar with Kevin, he's an American. He's from here, but moved to Crimea, I think about 10 years ago, to marry and settle down and live in one of the most beautiful places on earth, Crimea, where some of the most beautiful beaches are and resorts. And of course, that unfortunately is what was targeted in this attack. So, Kevin, let's just start from the beginning and tell us what happened yesterday, about what time it happened, and just give us the rundown and the latest info that you have as of this hour.
Well, um, what happened? First report I got of this yesterday was, oh, I'd say about 11 o'clock in the morning. So, what happened is it was a major holiday in the Russian Federation yesterday. Um, we call it what, Pentecost over there. They call it the Trinity here. 50 days after Easter. So I'm looking here. Yeah, so about 11 o'clock in the morning. So the beaches were full of tourists here on vacation because of long weekends. Um, Local families at the beach. Um, and the beach this happened on is on a sand beach, which is not real common in Crimea. Most of them are pebbles. When you find a sand beach, it's either on the east coast or the west coast, or the sand's brought in. So you had families out there enjoying a warm, sunny day, swimming in the sea, and five U.S. ATACM missiles with cluster warheads on them were fired at the beach from Ukraine. And, for people who don't know, the ATACMs are the latest ones are long range. And cluster munitions are actually, according to international law, illegal to use. And most Western countries, if not all of them, have refused to provide cluster bombs. And except for the United States, who, Biden sent them back about 6, 8 months ago, stating that they didn't have anything else to send, so they decided to send those. So typical, we We
Typical
passed
double speak.
international
Yeah,
law,
that's
so you can't use them, but hey, we're going to send them anyway.
right. That's typical Biden's double speak for you.
Yep.
Yeah.
So 5 missiles were incoming. Air defenses got 4 of them, and there was some shrapnel uh, down the beach a ways a little bit and off of the coast mainly. But the fifth missile actually got within, uh, the range where it would release all its little bomblets. And this is what happened with that one missile over the beach. I've heard a lot of propaganda out there about no, it was Russian air defenses shooting the missiles down, it's their fault. It was actually a missile that got through air defenses, it detonated, and there's a ton of these little tiny bombs that are really meant to kill people. And this is what went on over the beach. And there's one video circulating out on the internet right now that is an actual video taken while it was happening.
Yeah, and
Uh,
it's only a few seconds long. It's this really short video. That's the video that most of us, all of us over here have seen. And um, explain this to me. You mentioned to me that that video is actually illegal. Explain that to me. I guess that's why
during
we're not seeing a lot of video coming out of this attack.
Yeah, during any attack, it's illegal not only in Russia but in Ukraine as well to make videos of any active attack because it gives away the positions of air defenses.
I
And
see. Makes
you
sense.
know, so yeah, so it's obvious from the statements made that if you can geolocate this video exactly, you can determine where the air defenses are stationed. So whoever took this video likely will be getting a knock on the door today or tomorrow from uh, Russian security forces, and they will be arrested.
Oh my
So,
gosh, really?
oh yeah,
Just
absolutely.
oh no. I mean,
Tip,
we can't really see much in the video because everyone's ducking for cover, of course. It's hard to imagine that anything strategic would be given away in that brief video. And it's vital news and information that the rest of the world really needs to see and needs to hear. Um, so I hope that
yeah,
nobody goes to jail for that.
Yeah, and this is the argument that people make, but um, based on that, what sounded like gunfire or machine gun fire was actually these little bomblets going off. Um, so if the videos, whether people realize it or not, you post photos and videos from your phone on the internet, they have geolocation information on them. So it's very easy to figure out exactly where that video was taken,
Ah,
who it's
true.
tied to.
Yeah,
And
true.
with hearing the air defenses in the background, or even knowing that, with the range of the air defense, roughly in what perimeter those air defenses would be, this is why they don't want to allow that. The pictures afterwards, where you see cars with holes in them, the windows blown out, bleeding bodies, people, being treated by medics, that's different. They allow that because you know it isn't active air defenses. You can't calculate where they are from sounds and things like that.
I see. I see. This is the hard part for me to ask you about, but of course I have to. Can you tell me the latest numbers on dead, injured, what types of injuries we're talking about here?
Oh, absolutely. Let me just make sure I've got the most recent numbers for you, since I just got out of bed. 151 people injured, 4 people died. 2 of those 4 were children. Um,
Oh,
82 seriously injured, of which 27 were children, and 6 of those children were critically injured.
oh man.
So, Moscow sent an emergency services plane down to pick up those critically injured children and fly them back to Moscow for treatment. The other injured people and children were treated by specialists from Yalta. Yalta has some of the best neurosurgeons, psychiatrists, and psychologists, and trauma specialists in the peninsula. So those doctors were on site treating people. So, what else can I tell you? This has been classified as a terrorist attack, and Russia is directly implicating the United States. And people may say, well, you know, Ukraine fired the missiles. This is true. Ukraine did fire them. But the way the targeting systems on the attack missiles work is they have to be given coordinates from US satellites or drones. Same with the Germans. This is why the Germans have been hesitant to give long range missiles, because they have to be targeted by the Germans. The French missiles being used have to be targeted by the French. The British missiles have to be targeted by the British. So NATO is definitely involved in what gets struck and where. There was a US drone shortly before the attack, and all through the attack, flying off the coast of Crimea in international airspace. Russia's actually pushed the airspace out because it's considered a war zone. And these drones are very careful not to cross that line, because last time they did it, about 8 months ago, Russia brought the drone down. So this was a target that was picked purposefully by the United States to be attacked.
Right. I mean, that does make sense. Obviously, we had to coordinate intelligence with Ukraine to give them those coordinates. It sounds like those drones were flying some reconnaissance before the strike.
Oh, yeah.
And wow. So, what do you think the Russian response is going to be? I mean, I know this is just speculation. I don't know if you've heard anything this morning, because it's still fairly early in the morning over there. But have you heard anything from the Russian Foreign Ministry or the Ministry of Defense as to, I mean, they're blaming the United States, but what does that mean?
Well, likely it doesn't mean anything. Um, as much as, people might think that Russia and NATO want to fight each other, they don't. And, anytime there's something big that goes on, there's going to be a lot of bluster, a lot of high emotions. Sergei Lavrov, the foreign minister, has, placed the blame squarely on the United States and followed that up with there will be repercussions. There are Crimean Duma members who want Russia to strike the drones and take them out of the skies near Crimea. Reality is Russia probably isn't going to down drones in international airspace, because then that gives the United States the ability to say they attacked us, and
Yeah.
thus pulling NATO in. And that's not going to happen. I think it's really going to be about um, bringing this to the international community and trying to get condemnation for the United States, because the United States has said that they are only allowing the use of these missiles in the Kharkov area, and to attack places where the Kharkov attacks are coming from. And, we've known for a long time that that wasn't the case here. But this is a very visible attack where Russia can go into the UN, into forums with their partners here, the Chinese, the North Koreans, the Africans, and they can see, look, the United States is allowing their missiles to be used against civilians. So it's kind of a soft power thing. They will try to develop that backing against Western uh, governments. Of course, we already have, you know, the U.S. State Department's come out and said that they are aware of the attacks, but they have no opinion. So they're formulating the spin for this. I've
No
seen a couple of,
opinion.
yeah,
Really?
yeah.
Wow.
I've I've seen some uh, Western politicians and journalists saying that it was actually Russia's fault because they used their air defense to shoot at the missiles, and that caused the missiles to explode and kill people, which of course isn't the case. So,
Well, there's only one presidential candidate here in the United States who I've seen make any statement about it, and that was Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who, of course, put out a tweet last evening warning that this is, again, another dangerous escalation in this war. For now, it's a war of words, and I hope that you're right, Kevin, that it stays that way. But still, the more the rhetoric escalates, obviously the violence is going to escalate as well. And I'm kind of confused as to why Russia is calling this a terrorist attack instead of just classifying it as the usual, strikes by Ukraine on Russia in the course of this war.
well, it actually allows them to use that as, um, leverage when they're talking to their partners in other countries. When you think about it, Ukraine is constantly attacking Belgorod in Russia as well on the northern end of the country. So this isn't any more of you know, a terrorist attack than that is. Um, but because Belgorod is kind of obscure to people, they don't understand that there's civilians being hit there, and it isn't the big news. And of course, it's near the Kharkiv region. When you take Crimea and you put that into the mix, now it's very clear that this has nothing to do with the area the United States said that Ukraine was allowed to use missiles in. And of course, everybody knows that the US is doing the targeting. So it clearly implicates them as far as, uh, I use the word propaganda all the time. That's really what it is. It's, propaganda. People think of that as being lies. They actually aren't. It's just managing perceptions. And of course, this attack comes on the heels of several other things that have happened, not only yesterday, but over the last 7 days. So um,
Yeah, tell
it
me
seems.
about that. Kind of give me a little, what was the run up to this that you think brought this attack on?
So the run up to this was last week. It was Tuesday and Wednesday. Um, Somebody, I won't mention any particular three-letter agencies because I don't know which one it would be, had Google shut down several very large Western run YouTube channels that, I mean, these were channels with two, three, 400,000 viewers. And these
Do you know
channels,
which channels? Can you give me the names of the channels?
Sasha does Russia and, oh, what's the other one? Code Russia. I
I'm
think
not
that was,
familiar with those.
yeah. Sasha is a young woman. She's in her 20s. She's from the United States, Russian heritage. She's actually been traveling through Russia for the last several months, just going into people's homes, different cities. One of the last ones of her videos I watched, her and uh, her colleague, uh, they've been doing this thing of, will Russians help English speaking uh, people when they don't know them? And of course, they are showing that yes, Russians will help anybody, even English speakers. So they went to a little village and said, "Will villagers help us?" And of course, she speaks fluent Russian, but they went into this village and they kept asking people if they could tell them how to get to the next city, where the bus station was. Most people had no clue what they were talking about, so they used the hand signs and things like that. Then they found some children who spoke a little English. So and they got the help. They got to the bus station. The bus wasn't due to come for several hours. So one of the storekeepers, uh, who spoke English, had her husband drive them 2 hours to the next town. So the purpose of these channels is really to show Westerners that Russians are not the evil people that they're made out to be. They, um, they're helpful. They appreciate other people, respect them. That you don't have Westerners being arrested on the street for no reason at all. And so that was
And
that
so
was
obviously, yes, that's dangerous propaganda that the United States government says, "Oh no, we can't let people think that about the Russians. Like they're nice people. So we're going to have to shut down those YouTube channels." Is that about the
yeah,
size of it?
yeah, it goes against the Western narrative.
Right.
So that was the first thing.
Hmm.
Then Friday at midnight New York time, the U.S. government woke the Russian ambassador, up out of bed at midnight and informed him that they were going to close the Russian visa processing centers, which are Russian government run centers, and um, remove the uh, tax. Uh, it's too early. The tax exemptions from them.
Hmm.
And this is two things that are actually in violation of international law again. Not that
Yeah.
it matters to the US. But in 2007, up until 2007, all Russian visas were processed at the embassy. You mailed them into uh, one of the consulates or to the embassy, or you delivered it there. It went to the main embassy. They processed all the visa applications there. Usually took 10 to 14 days to get a visa. They took this group out of the embassy and put them as their own unit separately. And that's where they started directing all visa applications after that. They increased the staff. So now you could get a visa in, as little as 3 to 4 days. So in closing these visa centers, is what's happened is immediately that day, I started seeing all over the news, Telegram channels, YouTube, that Americans will never be able to get a visa to Russia anymore. Well,
Yikes.
the the closing, the U.S. Embassy and the State Department are telling people, if you have an application active with Russia right now, hurry up and complete it before the deadline. However, they haven't placed a deadline on when they're going to close the uh, processing centers.
Seems like that would leave a lot of travelers in limbo who are planning their trip to Russia or are on their way.
Well, and this was the purpose of that, is to get people to believe either they're going to be stranded. This is what all the news around it was. People will have delays, they could be stranded, people won't be able to get visas to Russia, and none of that's really the case. There may be some short-term delays. What Russia will do is they'll move people back to the embassy to process applications. They won't be able to keep all of them because they've removed the tax exemptions on the employees for income, property taxes, and sales and use taxes. So a lot of people don't know that according to international law, since the embassies and consulates are sovereign territory of the country that's there, you aren't supposed to be able to go in and say, we're closing this down on you, which they've done with what, three of the consulates in the United States already. The U.S. has.
I think it's
Um,
3, yeah. I'm kind
yeah,
of losing count, but yeah, I think
yeah.
that's about right.
So because it's their sovereign territory, they aren't subject to U.S. income tax. So it's going to make it harder for the diplomats to live there, and removing the property tax exemption will make doing business a higher cost. So keeping all the employees around it, it's really a means to force some headaches for Russia. But they will move the processing back to the embassy. This won't impact things a lot. And you can always cross the border, go to another country, and apply for visas. A lot of the news that was going out then also was that, gee, you have to be a resident or a citizen of the country you're applying for a Russian visa in, which was pure falsehoods. Um, I have on my YouTube channel, I did a video on this on Saturday evening, and I have a list as of Saturday of all the Russian embassies and consulates where a U.S. citizen can apply for a Russian visa, including Canada and Mexico. So drive across the
Interesting. So
border.
you can do that through Canada. Huh.
Yeah, drive across the border to Canada, apply for a Russian visa. They'll handle it for you. So if
Wow.
people really are feeling that, they don't want the extra delay of what may be a week or two in getting a visa at best, initially, the full impact we won't know for a while. But yeah,
And
you
Kevin,
can.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but will this affect Americans who are in Russia now trying to come back home?
No, because coming home isn't an issue because you're flying home on your U.S. passport. Um, if they want to stay here and they need to renew their visa, a lot of people are under the belief you have to go back to your home country. It's that same fallacy. Most people here is what they do is they fly to Armenia or Poland. They go to or Georgia. They go to the Russian embassy. They apply, and you have to spend 10 days there. Uh, and it's actually a fairly quick process. I know in Armenia, I've got a couple of people who've gone there recently. You fill out the application, you carry it to the embassy between 11 and 1, preferably at 11. They review the application, ask you a few questions to make sure that you're who you say you are. There's nothing that would prevent you from entering Russia. They give you a slip to take to the bank to pay the Russian Federation. You pay it, you bring the receipt back, and they say, okay, come back in 10 days, pick up your passport with your visa. So, it will be no worse in the United States either.
Interesting. So, my first thought when I heard about the attack on the beach there in Crimea yesterday, I was trying to figure out what was the thing that caused this retaliation. And of course, I guess I was wrong about this because I asked you about it privately. I thought it was in retaliation for the Russian attacks on the Ukrainian power facilities. But you don't think that's related?
I don't think it's related at all. These attacks on the power facilities have been going on for months and months and months.
True,
Um,
true.
you know, and reality is they will continue going on. Russia dropped a 3,000 kilogram fab bomb on a major gas refining station in Ukraine yesterday, not related to this attack. So, um, it's the same thing as the Visa Center. Western media is saying that the closing of the Visa Center is in retaliation for Russia expelling 10 diplomats from Russia. And those 10 diplomats were expelled back 2 years ago, when right after the United States expelled Russian diplomats. So if you
I
really look at
remember
the
all that. Yeah.
yeah, so they really aren't related. This is really about keeping control over the narrative. So they've eliminated the big Western voices saying Russia is an okay place to come. You can travel here safely. They're making it difficult, or the perception that it's difficult to get a visa to Russia, or impossible. And then this attack on the Crimean beach is likely a gee, see how unsafe it is to go there. Gee, we've had a
Right.
basketball player arrested for no reason at all, never mind that she was bringing illegal drugs in. We've had a journalist arrested for no reason at all, even though he was outside of a top secret military base taking pictures. Um, so
Right.
there,
And I should stress to we don't have too many Americans listening at this early hour of the morning, of course, but they will catch the replay later. Um, uh, for those who don't know, of course, Crimea is a big, big tourist city. And it's, when you visit Russia, lots of international tourists love to go to Crimea and especially those lovely beaches. So, yes, it does seem that there's a lot of propaganda value in scaring off the tourists and hurting the Crimean economy, right?
yep, correct.
Which is
And
probably already hurting because Crimea's been under constant attack. I don't know how many times they've tried to take out the bridge there, the Kerch Bridge in Crimea, but several, and it seems to be constant. There are missile and rocket attacks flying over your head all the time.
yeah, and they really haven't been focusing on the bridge lately, which it was a big propaganda thing. It's dangerous to go across the bridge. Russians don't tend to pay a lot of attention. I do know many Russians will not come here because they're afraid. Um, so it has affected things somewhat, but Russians are pretty stoic in about everything. What happens, happens. I'm not going to worry about it. And, you know, I planned on my vacation. I'm going to go anyway. So, yeah, these are all about showing as Russia a dangerous place to be. Americans should not come here. And then, of course, we throw the Dagestan attack yesterday into the mix. And,
Yes,
for
let's
those,
talk about that because that is just astonishing to me. You gave me some details this morning that I hadn't heard yet. I didn't realize the casualty numbers were so high. The shootout with police killed, what, 10 police officers, injured some 25 other people. I thought it was just one Orthodox church that was attacked. Now you're saying it's two, plus a Jewish synagogue that was attacked and burned, I guess, completely burned to the ground.
uh, I don't know if it's completely burned to the ground. I've seen pictures where they got the fire out about 6 hours later, and it's at least gutted. So, and the Jewish Commission in the area is actually reporting there were two synagogues hit. I can't verify that at this point, but that's what they're saying. So, Dagestan is in the North Caucasus, which is kind of a misnomer. They are the North Caucasus, but it's a coastal area of the Caspian Sea. It's as you go down towards Abkhazia, Georgia, that area. And so there were two cities that had attacks last night. They started about 6 p.m. Moscow time in one of the cities, and the initial raid was on an Orthodox church and what they're calling Abkhazian militants at this point slit the throat of the priest. He had served as the archpriest there for 40 years. They went in, they slit his throat. Um, and again, like I say, this was a big religious holiday, and the guy was 66 years old. They killed the guard there. There have actually been guards um, stationed at the churches and the synagogues because of these attacks. I don't know if you recall, about October of last year, there was an attack on the Dagestan airport. So there's been a lot of tension between Christians and Muslims and Jews in the area. Um,
Right. I remember, of course, the Dagestan airport incident. That was just, a few weeks after the October 7th attacks. And, it was like a plane load of Jews. And there was this misunderstanding. And they thought that this was a plane coming from Israel. And there were like hundreds of Dagestanis there at the airport waiting to grab them off the plane and do God knows what to them. Um, I do remember that.
yep.
And I remember at the time that Putin came out and, of course, issued a very strong condemnation of that attack and said, we absolutely will not tolerate this. And then after that, I don't really know what happened to the perpetrators and if they were successful in clamping down on this terrorism, because now we see it again. This happened again in Dagestan.
Yeah, and notice it always happens around Dagestan, and of course, uh, the biggest proponents of keeping the peace around there are the Chechens. And what happened after the last attack is the Chechens had their forces on leave from the front, and they kind of took control of things down there. Now their guys go back to the front. We have another attack down there, and the Chechens are again coming out and saying, we aren't going to put up with this. Kadyrov, the head of the Chechen Republic, actually made an announcement yesterday that he will have his troops hunt down these militants and kill them. He just says it like it is. And what we're seeing now is this is exactly what happened last night. So the first attack was in Derbent, and that was the raid on the Christian church where they slit the priest's throat. And then they attacked the synagogue 40 minutes before evening prayers. And
Oh my
they,
God. I'm sorry to interrupt. The priest who had his throat
yeah,
slashed. Is he alive
no,
or did he
dead.
die? Mm, man.
So yeah, it was a brutal killing. And then like I
Good.
say, they attacked the synagogue. They actually had a police squad stationed outside the synagogue because of uh, the attacks and the threats against the Jews in the region, um, as well as private security guards, and they're the ones who took the brunt of the attack there. And then they went into the
And I think you said that there weren't any injuries at the synagogue besides the security guards because they attacked it on a Sunday when nobody's there.
well, like I say, it was about 40 minutes before evening prayer. Um, yeah,
Oh, I got it confused. I thought you meant the Orthodox church was attacked on Sunday. It was the synagogue or the Orthodox
well, they were
church?
both attacked on Sunday.
I mean, before prayer when a bunch of people
The
were there.
synagogue, and I
Oh.
don't know if that
Hmm.
I am not Jewish. I do not know that much about it. I don't know if an evening prayer means with a bunch of people, or if it means the priests, or what it means. So
I see.
reports say there were no injuries at the synagogue, but it was firebombed and you know gutted if nothing else. But the
It looked
casualties
like a
there were police.
beautiful historic old synagogue too. It looked very
Yeah.
old. Yeah,
So and
historic
yeah,
building.
and there's tensions right now in that area between the Jews and some of the more uh, radical Muslim groups, Islamists, because of Israel. And this was the same thing that stirred up the problem with the attack on the airport back a while ago. Um, this has already been linked, of course, to uh, groups funded by the Ukrainian intelligence services. So, where Crimea is being directly blamed on the United States, this is being blamed on, uh, Ukraine. So, um, now in Mahachkala, which is the capital of Dagestan, um, there was a raid on a traffic police station, and there were three men uh, firing automatic weapons, and that's where the Russian Jewish Congress in the area is saying that uh, a synagogue in that city was also attacked and potentially burned, and and the militants also went to another Orthodox church there, and they had taken hostages, supposedly. Later reports clarified that it was actually a dozen people who had barricaded themselves inside due to the gunfire. So,
My God, this is so confusing. And it might be confusing to you too. I'm sure details are still sketchy at this point to get the story straight and what actually happened. But I mean, obviously, this seems like a very well coordinated, well planned attack in Dagestan. It's hard to believe that only three guys did all of this.
well, it was
Any idea how many might have been involved at this point
three guys in one city. So that
in
was
one
in
city?
Mahakala, where they had three shooters, three gunmen. I don't know how many were in Derbent. Um, However, in Derbent, they say that they had ended the anti-terrorism phase of operations about 11 p.m. local time, and that they had neutralized two assailants. And as of 2 a.m. local time in Mahakala, um, they were still looking for militants, but they had killed at least three, and they're looking for possible accomplices. But, you know, they were funded, they were, it's obvious if you see the videos of their movements and things, they were given um, you know, plans of where to go, what to attack. So, who it was done by is open to interpretation at this point. Like I say, local authorities are blaming it on Ukraine, of course, but they did have a shootout. The Russian forces did with Abkhazians at the Abkhazia border. So this is how they know that these guys were from Abkhazia, which is a Russian region, but they tend to be the guys who are a little more radical and anti-Russian. So they tend to be the guys that are gone to first by anyone who wants to generate problems inside Russia. So there's a couple of
Hmm, interesting.
yeah, there's a couple of things that play into this, which is again, it's unsafe to be here, supposedly. It plays into that role, but it also um, there's a little bit of this in the Crimea incident and a lot of it in the Dagestan incident to turn people against the Russian government, particularly with terror attacks like in Dagestan. If you get the Jews, the Christians, and the Muslims hating each other, um, that causes a big stir, and people start demanding that Russia do something. People begin to lose sight of the fact that the reason Russia acts so slowly in these cases rather than flying off the handle and killing a bunch of people is because if they flew off the handle and dealt with it, it would look bad for Russia. Look, they're exactly what they say they are. And
Right, sort of like their response after the Crocus City attacks
yep,
a few months ago. I mean, they rounded up some guys real quick, and we saw videos of torture. We saw, the guy's ears being cut off and other body parts being fed to them,
yep,
and this was all on video. And they wanted us to see that as a way of saying, "Don't mess with us." Um, but yeah, it's again that feeds into the Western narrative, though, that Russia is evil and look at what they do to people. But these guys are terrorists. I mean, they shot up a concert hall, guys.
Yeah, and Russians are not very kind to people like that. So if they can generate the same uh, attitude between different groups in an area that's fairly hard to control reasonably, um, it plays into that it's dangerous to go there, and it plays into that why isn't Russia doing more to end this military operation? Why aren't they doing more against terrorists? um, After the Crocus attacks, there was a period of time where people from uh, Tajikistan were absolutely hated here. They were calling for people to be deported, people, totally innocent people. Um, and there's a little bit of that in the Crimea attacks as well, because by attacking, much like Crocus, a civilian uh, activity or a civilian, oriented activity, you then get the white Christian Russians who come here on vacation saying, why isn't Vladimir Putin doing more? So, these are the two things they're trying to stir up. Hold on to the narrative about how dangerous it is here, and to stir up discord in the country, because they've made recent statements that Russia should be broken up into several small, easily controllable countries. And that's not going
Good
to
luck
happen.
with that.
Huh?
Yeah,
Yeah.
good luck with that.
Yeah.
I have to put on my tinfoil hat here a little bit and ask you, um, it seems a remarkable coincidence that the attack on Dagestan and the attack on Crimea happened on the same day. Do you think there's any connection between the two events?
Absolutely. Um, Western media propaganda. I think that's what it is. People here are on one of two sides of this, crying for the Russian Federation to act immediately. Like I say, with Crimea, we've got, most people probably don't know that Crimea has their own Duma. So, because it is an independent region of Russia, and they have autonomy, they have their own parliament, so to speak. And their parliament is calling for stronger action, shoot down the American drones. You hear a lot of Russians talking about, um, gee, it was probably planned and run out of Romania or Poland. We need to strike them with missiles. So they've stirred a lot of that up. In Dagestan, the reason you have Kadyrov stepping into it is because he is a very, very powerful man in Russia, and people listen to him. So it's requiring him to step in and say, you can't hold this against your brothers, and we fight side by side with Christians and Jews and Muslims. So we're all brothers. Don't hate each other. And and I will take care of this situation. Now, he's the kind of guy who acts, unlike Vladimir Putin, who makes very slow and carefully calculated attacks. They make a good cop, bad cop pair.
Yeah, I can see that. And it does seem to me that the uh the narrative, certainly from the Western point of view, is that once again it looks bad, and it looks like I think this is just a theory. I'll just toss it out there and see what you think of it. Ever since this war began, it seemed like the United States, of course, we're doing all that we can to undermine President Putin's popularity with the Russian people. He was just reelected once again by a tremendous margin. And, the longer the war goes on, it seems like the more popular he gets, which is confounding to us because here in America, when we're in a war, whoever the president is, his popularity tends to go down. And the more that we can, there's been tremendous national unity in Russia. The people have been behind their president, behind their military. At least it appears that way. And of course, that drives the United States nuts, and I'm sure it does Ukraine as well. That they want to undermine that in any way that they possibly can. So, of course, they would love to stir up some internal dissent in Russia and start getting the people fighting amongst each other, questioning the war effort, questioning the president, and starting to turn against the government. Do you think that's what's going on here?
Oh, absolutely. They are definitely uh, trying to get, you know, a a 2014 Maidan to happen in Russia. And, you know, I've actually seen this compared to even the Prigozhin, what are they calling it? The Prigozhin fiasco. Um,
Yeah,
it
that
was,
was a fiasco, all right.
yeah, it was a similar thing. Um, we know Prigozhin when he marched on Moscow. Um, you know, he there was large amounts of U.S. dollars found in one of his apartments. He
Yep.
didn't just all of a sudden decide, me and 500 men are going to march on Russia and overthrow the government. That would be like Oklahoma deciding that they're going to march on Washington D.C. and overthrow the government.
Right.
So yeah,
That's a long march from Oklahoma to Washington.
yeah. So um, and it was from Rostov to Moscow too. I was on the train at the time,
True.
so I actually went by those guys marching to Moscow. But
I remember that.
yeah,
Yep, you did.
so um, and what Westerners don't understand, and this is something I did not understand until I lived here. You will never understand the true nature of Russians and brotherhood without actually coming here and living here. Um, I've been married to a Russian/Ukrainian woman for almost 20 years, and I thought I knew everything about Russia, the Soviet Union, Ukraine. But when you move here and you live here, you see so much more. We talk a lot about Russians and how stoic they are. Um, Russians are used to having to defend what belongs to them with their lives. It happened in the Tsarist times. It happened in World War One. It happened in World War Two. It's been happening ever since. Um, and a lot of that stoicism isn't really necessarily the support of the government, but the fact that if I and my family do not protect myself and my family, and I do not provide for my family, then nobody else is going to protect me. The government isn't going to step in and, you know, hand out food to me. They aren't going to, give me monthly cash payments. No, Russia does have social services to help people here, but not to the extent that there are in the West. Um, you know, if you are not a citizen in this country, you get no social services. You can get medical care, a limited amount of medical care, but none of the social services. So people don't expect the government is going to give them anything. Therefore, they have a saying here that you're closer to your neighbor than you are to anybody else. If there was, God forbid, an attack on my neighborhood, it will be my neighbors who come to defend. And you throw this through the entire country, and this is why people support Vladimir Putin. He does for his people, and he treats even, I'm kind of hesitant to say the enemy when I refer to Ukraine because they're not viewed as the enemy. We live next door to Ukrainians. The whole story that Ukrainians cannot go to Russia anymore, we're all driven out of Crimea is not true. We have Ukrainians who go back and forth across the border, men included, um, on vacations. They own properties next to us. Well, they own apartments. Can't own a property here anymore. Um, but they're still treated like brothers. We run up against
Mm,
Ukrainians all the time, and you know, they're all Slavs. They're all
right.
brothers and sisters. A Russian anywhere in the world that comes across another Russian will be fully supported by that other Russian.
I guess that's kind of unique to Crimea because it's been both Russian and Ukrainian and has such a long history of brotherhood between the two. Is that more of a Crimean thing?
No, actually, it's not. I see it here a lot because there were people. It was Russia, then Ukraine, then Russia again. So, um, I see it more here. But in general, in Russia, Ukrainians are not hated here, um, and they will be treated, like a brother or sister. Many of them are brothers and sisters. Um, I used this example the
Yes,
other
quite
night.
literally.
Yeah,
Quite literally. Yeah.
say Canada broke up into a bunch of different countries. You have people from Toronto who are originally from British Columbia, and all of a sudden they're Torontoites. Um,
Right.
you know,
And, then you've got the Quebec separatists, right?
yeah,
Not so unlike your situation there. It just hasn't turned violent, thank goodness.
yeah. So many of these peoples are brothers and sisters. My wife's brother and many of her friends and other relatives live in Ukraine. They were all Soviets at one point. She also has many relatives who are Russian that live in Russia. Um, so they are all brothers and sisters. My wife is, you know, her grandparents, one of them was Russian, one was Ukrainian, and, on both sides of the family. So they're one people, whether people want to believe that or not. And people view it as a weakness of Putin that he does not respond quickly, particularly in the West. Attacks like this
Mhm.
happen here, and people here start going, "Well, gee, why is he acting like this?" Until they get to thinking back through why. And it isn't because Putin is weak. It isn't, and this goes to a lot of the propaganda that's heard in the West. Um, Putin is slow and deliberate in his movements in Ukraine because he does not want to hurt civilians. Do civilians get hurt? Absolutely, both sides. But,
Yeah.
um, his goal is to accomplish his military goals there without harming any more civilians than is necessary. I hear a lot of Western news talking about, like, in Kharkov. Um, gee, they're shelling schools, they're killing civilians. Reality is before they ever started making a move on that region, they told people they were coming in, and many people refuse to leave. You go talk to some of these people in the Kharkov area, and the response will be, "I've lived here my entire life. I own my home. I own my property. Why would I leave?" And I've heard some Americans who fought on the Ukrainian side say, "Oh, I spoke to these people. They do not support Russia." Well, you take an American in a Ukrainian uniform who does not speak Ukrainian or Russian. You put him with a Ukrainian military interpreter, and you go to somebody and say, "Do you support Russia?" They're going to say absolutely not. Guaranteed, because they don't know if you're CIA, if you're working for Ukrainian intelligence. They don't know if they're going to be arrested and hauled off, killed, beaten, or whatever. But in private, you talk to these people and they will say, you know, what I really want is peace, and I want my language, I want my culture. I do not want this Western style culture. I'm waiting for Russia to come in. And this is why many people don't leave those areas. And these are the people who end up getting hurt. Now, it's usually villagers, so it's not as big of a problem as it's made, but the cities, the schools, the hospitals have all been abandoned and evacuated by Ukraine by that point. So the buildings are being struck, but they're being struck because they're defensive positions for Ukraine. Kharkiv has no defenses built around it. All of their defenses rely on them being able to occupy apartment buildings, schools, hospitals that they've already evacuated.
I see. You know, it's one of the things that's so strange to me about this war, and maybe it ties into what you were just saying about the brotherhood between Ukrainians and Russians. But that we're 2.5 years into this. Well, I call it a war. I know the Russians call it the special military operation, but that's what's so strange to me because it's obviously a state of war, and yet neither Ukraine has never declared war on Russia, and Russia's never issued a formal declaration of war on Ukraine. It's the damnedest war I've ever seen in that sense. Can you any insight on why it's not a formally declared war?
Because they don't want a formally declared war. You know, if Russia was, a lot of people are going to call me the Russian propagandist for saying this. If Russia declared war against Ukraine, the war would be over in weeks, if not days. It will
You
be
think?
everything that people expected when Russia initially went into Ukraine. And even that wasn't intended to take over vast territories. They went in as a message of, look, we told you we would do this if you didn't agree to neutrality and not become part of NATO. So this is a message to you. They went in, they retreated, they had some losses, they made some mistakes, they learned from them, and now it's a slow push. Kharkov is not to take the city of Kharkov. Russia has no intentions of taking that city. Um, this is about pushing the Ukrainian military far enough back that they can't strike the Belgorod area anymore, and that's all that's about. So
Mm, that's so interesting to me. I've never seen a war fought quite like this before, and I don't know if you object to me calling it a war, but from my standpoint, it's obviously a war, with so many people dying on each side and so much immense destruction of property and, of course, seizing territory, conquering territory. To me, that's the definition of warfare. Am I incorrect calling it a war?
I don't think you're incorrect at all. It
Yeah. I
it
know
is
you
what
can't
it
call it
is.
that because you're over there in Russia. You have to call it the SMO, but um,
Yeah, and it's, as a Westerner, we always grow up with the mentality is that what you do when you have a war or when you're going in to protect democracy is you do the scorched earth policy. You go in, you take out um, the electrical, water, gas infrastructure. You carpet bomb cities, killing millions of people. And, growing up with that, people like you and I, that's the way wars are fought. So, this whole idea of, uh, you know, Russia not doing it that way is just a foreign concept. Again,
mhm.
how willing is um, Texas going to be to carry out that scorched earth policy against New Mexico. Um,
Right. I was just going to say something like that, or make a similar, uh, comparison. I guess the way that people in North America could kind of wrap their minds around the way that this special military operation or war, whatever you want to call it, is being fought over there is, imagine if the United States and Canada had a dispute like this and we ended up, getting militarily involved with one another. I would think that there would still be some hesitation to go full scale, full bore war because we think of Canadians as our brothers and they look at
yeah,
us that way?
exactly.
Is that a pretty good comparison?
Yeah, it's a good comparison. So it's it's just the way it is. Our mutual colleague, Dr. Mike Krupa. I was speaking to him the other day, and I was seeing this even in chats yesterday on shows I was doing. People saying, "Oh well, Poland needs to be nuked," and the Poles, support Ukraine. They don't support Russia. Reality is that the Polish people are Slavic people. A vast majority of Polish people support Russia in how they're conducting this operation. They do not want to be another Ukraine. The government, that's a different story. We've seen the same thing in Georgia recently. There was a lot of stirring up going on about this, the Georgian government taking on a new law on registering foreign agents. And, believe it or not, the big country that requires anybody who gets a majority of their support from another country to register as a foreign agent, the United States, is the one who is fighting against it in Georgia. And they had a very pro Western government. The people have thrown that government out. They've passed this law anyway. And now they're under threat of sanctions from the United States. Why? Because there's a vast majority of NGOs operating in Georgia, the country of Georgia, that are US funded. And now they will have to expose that.
Uh-huh.
So Georgia recently came out and said that we're reestablishing diplomatic relations with the Russian Federation. So, um,
Mm. Speaking of our friend Michael Krupa, since you brought him up, I just sent him an invitation. It's early morning for him over there. I don't know if he's busy, but I just said, "Hey, Mike, can you jump on the space for a few minutes?" So we'll see if he can make it. But I just invited him to come join us and get his perspective too.
yeah, Mike is, he was online about 15 minutes ago. So who knows?
Yeah, it would be nice if he could pop in with us for a little bit. But Kevin, I wanted to ask you. I know that you probably need to get on with your day, but is there? What do you think happens next? What do you think after the events of yesterday? Where do we go from here?
I think you will see a lot of this saber rattling going on. I fully expect we will hear from the fabulous Mr. Kirby sometime in your morning,
Yeah.
placing the blame squarely on Russia for these attacks. And
Well, of course, we always find a way to blame Russia. I mean, they blew up their own pipeline and they did this to themselves and that to themselves. I don't
yeah,
know how they're going to work this, what kind of spin they're going to put on this. Although your theory was interesting that by shooting down the missiles, they're going to say that Russia caused these civilian injuries and deaths.
yeah. So
Yeah,
instead, they shouldn't have shot at them and they should have let them, you know,
and just let the
go.
missiles land on all those people.
Well, the comment I've already heard is that they were inbound to a military installation. So had they not shot them down, the military installation would have been hit. So it's Russia's
Well,
fault for firing air defense over civilians.
but
Um,
is there a military installation anywhere near this beach?
Not close enough that you could say it was a target.
Yeah.
I know where the military installations are here. I have some contacts in that area. I've been to them. Nowhere near this beach. So, but people in the West don't know that. So they will take what,
That's right.
the US government says unless they're listening to people like us. Um,
Right. And of course, at this early hour of the morning, I don't think too many people are listening to us, but
yeah,
um,
maybe they'll listen later, but um,
yes.
it's
Do,
it's just, again, we were talking about the scorched earth policy of the United States. Like I say, the first thing they do is take out the electric infrastructure. Yet when Russia attacks limited amounts of Ukraine's electric infrastructure, they make it into this big awful thing in the United States. Look at the evil Russians hitting civilian infrastructure. Um, they're doing it. It's the pot calling the kettle black.
do you think that this attack on the beach in Crimea was deliberate? Do you think that that beach was targeted because it was a civilian beach, or do you think it was just a tragic error?
These drones that the United States flies out there. I actually helped develop uh, the tracking systems in them. They're accurate within meters. So, since those ATACMS missiles, the long range ones, have to be targeted by the United States, that beach was picked.
My God, who does that?
The United
Seriously, who
States.
does that? Who bombs a beach full of civilians on a holiday?
Well, who bombs a music concert in the Israel Gaza border on a holiday? Um,
Mm.
you know, who bombs uh, a farmer's market on a Sunday in Belgorod when knowing that it's going to be full of civilians? You know, it. The answer to the question is the United States. They need to keep this war going until the elections because this is Biden's only hope of winning. Um, we know he doesn't run the country. He's not coherent enough. We have with them excluding RFK Jr. from everything. We have two geriatrics running for president. Um, One of them has no mind whatsoever left, doesn't know what his name is without a cue card. And the other one has enough dementia that he can't focus on anything for, more than 3 minutes. Um, so Biden's hopes is to get reelected as a wartime president. And of course, the guys, follow the money. The guys making all the money are the U.S. military industrial complex. Look at their earnings over the last 3 years, billions and billions and billions of dollars of profit. They've got Europe expending all of their stockpiles of munitions and they have to restore them. Who do they buy them from? Because they have very limited production of their own. They buy it from the United States. Lockheed, Raytheon, companies like that. We've sent out our stockpiles from the United States. Who gets to replenish those? Raytheon, Lockheed, um, Israel. Let's keep shipping them weapons. Who do they come from? Same guys. Who are on the boards of directors of these large military industrial complexes? Senators, representatives, uh, Mr. Kirby himself, um, the Secretary of Defense. These guys are making millions and millions and millions of dollars personally off of these wars. This is what the United States does. Um, it's a money making machine. It's good for the economy. We keep people, employed. as long as you're willing to build missiles and bullets and artillery shells.
That's a very cynical point of view, but I'm afraid it's the correct one, my friend. I think you're right. And speaking of friends, our friend Michael Krupa just slid into the room from Poland. Mike, if you can hear me, I just sent you a co host invite if you'd like to accept that and join us here for a few minutes. We're going to close the space pretty soon because it's like 3 o'clock in the morning where I am in Central Time in the United States. I got to go to bed. But I'm enjoying talking to you, and I'd love to have Michael join us for a few minutes, or rather, I should call him Dr. Krupa now.
Doctor, yeah.
Dr. Krupa. Now he's got his PhD. Uh, and I think Mike's going to join us here for a few minutes. I'd love to say hello to you, my friend. How are things in Poland this morning? Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, good evening, everyone. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Perfect. Yep, it's a nice morning here. Yeah, I would just basically add on what Kevin said about the attack on Sevastopol. Let's not forget that Victoria Nuland, just before she left off to work at Columbia University, she said that this is a good jobs program for the United States. We're creating well-paid jobs here, and we're not losing anybody. So they're stating it out in the open. I think it fits, perfectly well with what Kevin just stated, that people are making money, and Biden, or whoever replaces Biden, because I don't think we're still out of that forest yet. I'm thinking there are some candidates waiting in the shadows who might replace him. But yeah, there is definitely that feeling that he wants to be a wartime president. He wants to be a sort of Roosevelt resurrected, and that'll somehow propel him back to a second term. What was interesting over the last couple of days, it's sad though that he's going to jail. I'm thinking of Steve Bannon right now, but I encourage you guys to see the interview that Steve Bannon did with Colonel McGregor. It's up online on YouTube, which sort of signaled that at least some parts of Trump world are opening up to Doug McGregor once again, which is a good sign. Although I'm pretty sure there's a lot of people in and around Trump that unfortunately would not want to see McGregor's insight coming back into the fold of MAGA thinking. But we'll see how that goes. So just some insights from my end here. But I hope you're all doing well, Kevin. I hope you're all doing well also out there in Crimea, and stay safe, my friend.
Yeah,
And
thanks, Mike.
Lori, yes, stay safe from the twisters also. God bless you guys.
Yeah, we don't need any more tornadoes.
Yeah.
We've had 100 tornadoes just in the last 2 months, guys. This has been the most intense tornado season. I'm, born and raised in Oklahoma, where tornadoes are a way of life. But wow, we've never had a tornado season quite like this one. But now it's just hot. It's like 100 degrees every day with a heat index of 112, which makes working outside to do those tornado repairs on our garage really brutal. Really, really brutal. So thanks for those kind words, Michael. And fortunately, our friend Kevin is okay. Although it sounds like his wife was a little too close for comfort to that beach yesterday.
Yeah, this is the Russian stoicism. She came home, she's like, "Yeah, heard the air defense going off." And I said, "Well, so did you run home?" She said, "No, we finished picking peaches. Go get them out of the car."
I love that.
Kevin, I just want to ask you, what's the feeling among the residents of Crimea? Is it yeah, it's time for payback now, or people are really pissed that something has to be done on a symmetrical basis right now? What's your feel of the public opinion on the peninsula?
Crimeans in general aren't paying a lot of attention to it. Sevastopol residents are looking for payback. The Crimean Duma is looking for payback. Are they going to get it? They will likely get it in the form of, another barrage of missile attacks on Ukraine sometime in the next couple of days. I don't think you're going to see anything radically different than what Russia's done in the past. Putin will think about it. He'll say, strike these targets, and, it'll be a massive attack.
Well, let me just give you guys some inside baseball from the European Union, from the European parliamentary elections. there will be most likely three conservative factions in the European Parliament as we speak: identity and democracy, conservatives and reformers. And the AfD in Germany right now is coalescing a group of smaller European parliamentarians to create a very prominent anti-war, pro-sovereigntist group. Der Spiegel reported on it a few hours ago. And that friend of mine, Grzegorz Brown, Kevin, whom I sent you the interview with Clayton Morris on Redacted. That's got over 1 million hits, by the way.
Yep.
Poland's most prominent anti-war parliamentarian. He will most likely be also forming a part of that coalition. So some good news coming out of the European Parliament. Around July 7th, we should have information whether they will actually form that faction, but it's looking good so far that we'll have a strong anti-war, anti-globalist, pro-European in the proper sense of the word voice in Brussels and Strasbourg. So just some inside baseball on that.
Cool. That's good news.
That's very good news. Maybe, just maybe, we can finally start to pull back from this escalation, because it's getting to a very dangerous point where we're talking about NATO getting involved. As you guys probably have heard here in the United States, they're trying to bring back the draft, which is sending shockwaves, especially through the youth here in the United States. Nobody wants to go over there and get involved in a war in Europe.
Yeah, you perhaps referring to the automatic registration?
Yes, sir.
Um, Reality is they aren't reestablishing it; they're just tightening it up. Um, you know, a lot of people don't realize, and a lot of people don't register. But all males over 18 years of age are required by law to register for you know, for the draft in the United States. So
True.
all they're doing is automating it.
There's also, talk of drafting women or
Yeah, it's
making women register.
yeah, it's actually not in the bill. Yeah,
It
I
isn't?
did I did the research on this one back when it was
Oh,
announced. Yeah,
interesting. So that was disinformation.
yeah.
It's
The
good to
only
have
thing
Kevin
they're
on
doing
board.
is automating it because people aren't registering.
Interesting. Interesting. Guys, what do you think the chances are that this thing escalates to the point that NATO troops do get involved? You
Um,
think it's a lot of hype?
I don't see in Poland any appetite for that in public opinion. There was a poll last week. Actually, it was a part of a survey done by a professor at the University of Warsaw about the changing attitudes of Poles towards Ukrainian refugees, which is sort of a harbinger of views on everything else. And whereas in March 2022, the support was around 72% for Ukrainian refugees coming into Poland, helping, and so on. Right now, it's dropped to, I think, 30 or 32%. So, and people,
Woo!
yeah,
Wow.
people are having enough. And there was also a recent poll,
Yeah.
I think from May, about a question of whether Poland should enter Ukraine with soldiers. And the definitive majority said absolutely not. So, at least from our end, it'll be suicide from the government to try anything on that end. And I don't think they have the force and the wherewithal to force people to actually, obey such an order. And I've noticed there's been a lot of dissidents also in the military, because we not only have a problem with Ukraine, but we're also having a problem with the Belarusian Polish border. Well, that's a longer story, but we have several 100,000 migrants pouring into Poland from that end, and it's basically turning slowly into a Polish version of the U.S. Mexican border. That's obviously a result of stupid Polish policies regarding Minsk, and Lukashenko has responded asymmetrically. But it is what it is. So basically along the whole eastern borderline, there's a big mess in Poland with either thousands of millions of refugees coming in from Ukraine, plus defending the border with Belarus. So it's pretty chaotic here on the east, and I don't think
That I did not know that.
yeah, yeah,
Wow,
yeah.
Mark.
It's not being reported as much as the mainstream media in the West. Although one Polish soldier was killed just 2 weeks ago, he was stabbed by an illegal immigrant. There was a funeral, I think, a week ago. So they're ramping things up there because we actually have a border wall with Belarus that was built during the last regime of law and justice. So I'm pretty sure as things heat up on the Polish-Belarusian border, you'll hear more about that in the Western media. But I don't think right now. Well, let's begin with the basic fact: we don't have anything to send to Ukraine, so that's actually a good thing in a way. But
True
yeah,
that.
so I'm just some insight from Poland on that.
Yeah, buy more from the United States. That's the whole idea.
Yeah. More F-35s, more F-35s.
Yeah, need to crash some more.
All right, my friends, I'm going to be dropping, but love to hear you all again and hear you soon. I'm pretty sure. Take care.
Thanks,
Bye, bye,
Mike.
guys.
Thank you so much for dropping
Thanks for
by.
stopping by, Mike.
See you.
Thanks, brother. And I think we're about to close the space down so that I can go get a little shut eye before I have to go to work in the morning. But Kevin, was there anything that I neglected to ask? Anything else that we need to cover?
No, I don't think so. I think we pretty much covered it. You know, expect responses in the next couple of days, and don't worry. I don't think the world's going to end.
That's reassuring. I think we all need to hear that right now. Tensions are very high. This feels a lot like World War III. And I'm just hoping that tensions will calm and, you know, no matter what you think of Vladimir Putin, for our listeners out there, I'm actually kind of glad that he's the one who's in charge of Russia right now because you never know what another leader with a hot temper might do after a day like you had on Sunday. Putin has always been steady as she goes. He doesn't make any, rash moves. And like you said, is very calculated and always very restrained in his responses. So God only knows what it would be like if anybody else besides Putin was in charge of Russia. Kevin, any thoughts on what Ukraine might do next after this?
I think it'll be more of the same. Um, they're going to continue trying to hit Sevastopol. They do it on almost a daily basis, either Sevastopol or the Krasnodar region, which is just on the mainland side of the peninsula. Um, it's just drumming up, uh, you know, news cycles for them. So I think that's what they're going to continue doing. Um, we have a mutual colleague who would insist that things are not as bad off for Ukraine as people draw it out to be. That it's a stalemate. It is certainly not a stalemate. I think these are the death throes of a government that will collapse soon. I don't think the country will go away, but I think the government will collapse.
Which kind of brings me to my final question. I've been wanting to ask you this actually for a week now, but now that I've got you on the line, I just have to ask your thoughts on the ceasefire proposal that Putin has put forward on the table. Do you think there's any hope for it?
No, um, I think it's the best that, under the current circumstances, Ukraine will get. They aren't going to get any better. And this is a lot of the statements that, well, it's ridiculous. It's, nothing that could ever be considered. Constitutionally, Russia has already accepted these regions as part of the Russian Federation. Um, they belong to Russia. They aren't going to bend on that. They're going to have to give up those regions. They're going to have to give up Crimea. I hear a lot of people saying, well, maybe Crimea, but those other regions, maybe they'll let them, be administered by, a more reasonable Ukrainian government. Won't happen. Those are non negotiable points. Um, stopping it when they withdraw their troops. I think that is a requirement. But you start looking at the points that come out of these peace summits that have never included Russia. And you've got things like, well, they'll withdraw to, pre 1991 borders. This is as much of a no go. So, um, Russia will give up their military. That's a no go. Um, I think that particular peace plan was put forth when it was just before that peace summit that they had on purpose, so that the world would look and say, under the current circumstances, those who actually hear news from both sides of the world will look at it and say, Putin's actually being pretty reasonable there. And it's a good way to at least sit down and talk. But there was never an intention that the West would accept. This was stated right off the bat. The West will never accept our proposal. And of course, they didn't. Uh, when you have two sides who refuse to even sit down, there's no sense in even throwing proposals out there. But I will say that Putin's plan, under current circumstances, is the best Ukraine is going to get. They would maintain Odessa, so they would maintain their seaports. They, would be guaranteed security, actually not by Russia, but by the West, as long as NATO stayed out of the country.
Right. I mean, it seems to me that if I were advising Zelensky, I'd say take that deal, because if you don't, this is going to go on, and you're going to lose even more territory, most likely, before it's said and done. Not to
Yeah,
mention all more lives, more precious lives lost.
yeah, he is losing more territory as we speak. Um, I would advise him of the same thing. Unfortunately, we are not embedded in his government. Um, I often hear the claim of how can Ukraine be a Nazi state when the president is Jewish? Well, most Jews that grew up in the Soviet Union were not religious in the least little bit anyway. So it's just a label that's been placed on him. Is the
It's good
Nazi?
PR. It's nice
Yeah,
PR. Yeah.
it's good PR. Is Ukraine as Nazi oriented as maybe Russia says it is? I would also say that that is PR. They have them, so do every other country in the world. Probably a little more in the Ukraine area, um, but it isn't nearly as bad as it's made out to be. So, um, a reasonable compromise on all of this is, yeah, withdraw your troops, claim neutrality, and replace the government with a more neutral government, and keep the rest of your territories.
Right. And stay out of NATO. Isn't that just a non-starter?
Yeah, that's the stay neutral part. You know,
Right.
um, Russia. It goes back to how they're doing things slowly and carefully. I hear all this news out of the West saying that Ukraine insists that seized assets of Russia in the West will have to go to Ukraine to rebuild all these areas that have been destroyed by Russia. Reality is Russia's already rebuilding all these areas. You should see the city of Mariupol. That was a destroyed city. It was basically taken to the ground, and it is
It
a
looked like
beautiful.
Gaza. It looked like
Yeah,
Gaza looks now. Yeah.
yes, and right now it is a beautiful modern city where all people have to do to claim their home there free of charge from the Russian government is show up with their papers that show that that's where they were residents and owned property then. I owned an apartment. Well, yep, you proved it. Here you go. Here's your apartment. And I have workers that are actually up there doing work up there. I know people who live up there. I've seen it. Um, they're rebuilding these areas as quickly as they run uh, the Ukrainian artillery out of range.
And that's really quite incredible how
Yeah,
quickly they were able to rebuild Mariupol.
yeah,
It's astonishing. And I have seen video and recent photographs. It is beautiful now.
yeah. And
Um,
it's
let's
and it's
let's hope
not
that they
the
don't
only.
destroy it again if it doesn't become a battlefield again.
Yeah, I don't think it'll happen, or Russia wouldn't be rebuilding it already. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Kevin, this has been so enlightening, and I thank you for taking the time to update us. I've been on the edge of my seat waiting to talk to you, waiting for you to wake up this morning so that I could get the latest updates from you. And I hope that you and your family stay safe. Above all, I wish you safety. And we love you, brother. And thank you so much for joining us this morning. Hopefully, we won't have any more bad news to report for a while so you can enjoy your day.
yeah, thanks for that, Lori. I appreciate you staying up until the wee hours of the morning. Uh, for me, for a change.
Right, it's
Um,
usually the other way around. I'm waking you up at 3 in the morning to come on the show.
yeah, and people should know Lori was pinging me at 1 o'clock in the morning when I was actually up, but unfortunately I was on the air with a half a dozen channels yesterday, and I couldn't get with her before now. So thank
I didn't
you,
know
I
if you were
appreciate it.
awake or not at that hour, but I was worried about you, and I just wanted to know that you and your family were all right.
Yep, I know
I
that.
worry every time I hear about yet another attack on Crimea. You're always my first thought, brother.
Yep,
So,
I got
thank you.
messages from people in Moscow asking the same thing. That's the first thing that happens here is people look out for people they know. Is are you guys okay? So yeah, we're okay.
Well, it's good to know
Not
that you got a lot of friends and that you're
yeah.
loved, and we're worrying about you.
Yep.
And I want to thank everyone who tuned in. This space is recorded, so if you missed some of it, if you want to go back and catch the parts that you missed, you can listen back at any time. And I'm sure that when our friends here in North America wake up here in a few hours, they'll go listen to the replay of this space. And if you enjoyed it, please do hit that share button. Repost the space, get it out there, get the information out. Kevin is a wealth of information. He's a great reporter, and he's always quite accurate. That's why I always turn to Kevin when something happens over there and ask him for an update, because I can always count on Kevin to have the story pretty much right. I'd say 98% of the time. Very seldom is Kevin wrong. So thanks, Kevin, for the accurate, solid reporting. We appreciate you. And thanks, everyone, for listening. And I'm Lori Spencer signing off and going to bed.